A man who has the courage, heart, character, and vision to lead America, the greatest nation on earth. Please rise and welcome the next President of the United States, Mitt Romney.
Thank you. Thank you, please. Thank you. Wow, this is a lot of Republicans, I'll tell you that. Thank you. Gosh, there are more Republicans in this room than I have in Massachusetts. It's an honor to be here. Lancaster County, boy, there are a lot of Republicans here. Boy, do I want your support. We're going to win the White House in November with your support. You know that? And thank you to Katie True for that generous introduction, a real leader. And with a name like True, you have to believe every single word she says. I appreciate that. There were other good words I heard today. Your governor, Governor Corbett, endorsed my campaign, my candidacy. I appreciate his support. And that of Pat Toomey as well from last week. It is it's a pleasure to be able to do what I get to do, to go across the country and meet people of all different backgrounds and interests and get to know them a little better. Today I had a little time. We sat down at a picnic table with 4 families and talked to the couples about what's happening in their lives. You come away from experiences like this more optimistic about America. If you only gauge the country by what you see on the evening news, you may be somewhat cynical. Because by and large, what you're going to see on the news is what's gone wrong during the day. People who've done bad things. But the great majority of Americans are doing good things every day. We're a hardworking, entrepreneurial, patriotic people. We love America. But as I go across the country and meet with people of differing backgrounds, what I hear is how tough these last 3 or 4 years have been. These have been tough times. We have about 24 million people in America that are out of work or have stopped looking for work or are underemployed. And did you know, by the way, that of the jobs lost during the Barack Obama presidency, 93% were women who lost those jobs? And the president said, oh, but that's because in the Bush years, men tended to lose their jobs. It's like, well, okay, that may be true, but this president has prolonged the recovery, made it more difficult for us to come out of recession, and as a result, the job losses have continued and women have borne the brunt. And I hear that as I go across the country. I also hear about homes foreclosed on. The values of homes declined. 2.8 million homes foreclosed on during this president's term. Median income in America has dropped 10% in the last 4 years. Long-term unemployment, record high levels of long-term unemployment. These have been tough years. And the reason I'm convinced is in part due to the fact that the president doesn't understand what is unique and exceptional about America. This president was on the Today Show just after his inauguration. And he said, if I can't turn the economy around in 3 years, I'll be looking at a one-term proposition. And we're here to collect. This nation was founded upon unique principles. And those principles, in my view, are what is essential to truly igniting our economy. And it's those principles which have been violated in some respects, attacked in some ways, that have kept this economy from rebooting and allowing Americans to go back to work and to have confidence in the future. The founders, when they established the nation, wrote these words. They said that we were endowed by our Creator with our rights. Not the state, not the king, but our Creator. And that made the citizen the sovereign and the government the servant. And among our rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We would be free in this nation to have political freedom, economic freedom, personal freedoms, and economic freedom would be that which would propel our economy to lead the world. It was an extraordinary idea that instead of having a government tell people what enterprises they should enter or what they should do with their businesses, that individuals, free people, creating free enterprises would create an economy that would lead the world, and it has. And yet we've seen from this president a nonstop series of attacks on personal freedoms, religious freedom, and economic freedom. And his attacks on economic freedom have not only hurt the capacity of America to create jobs, they've made many wonder whether America can keep up with our obligations and the promises that should be delivered to our children in the future. Now, when I say the president has attacked economic freedom, let me just describe some of the ways that's happened. And you know perhaps as much as I do in that regard. But first of all, of course, taxes. Taxes, by their definition, limit our economic freedom. They take money from our enterprises and from free people, and they go to government. Now, for that reason, you want to keep them absolutely as small as possible and use them for things that are absolutely essential, like our national defense and like our schools and care for our seniors. But this president has a very different view on taxes. On this tax day, look at what he's proposing. He wants to raise the tax rate, the individual marginal tax rate, from 35% to 40%. Now, don't forget the impact that would have on jobs and the economy, which is so vital to our economic freedom. Because 54% of America's private sector workers are employed in businesses taxed at the individual rate, not the corporate rate, but the individual rate. And so when you raise those taxes from 35% to 40%, you kill jobs. That's what raising taxes does. These Democrats out there, they want to raise taxes. Look, we should be concerned about jobs and getting people back to work. With 24 million Americans out of work or stopped looking for work, this president has violated that trust. We need to get Americans back to work. That is the kind of leadership we'll finally bring to the White House. By the way, you know the vice president's also proposed a new global tax. I'm not quite sure what it's going to look like, but he's the gift that keeps on giving. I mean, a new global tax. And then the president's been out campaigning for the Buffett rule. And people took a look at that Buffett rule. This really was a gimmick. It wasn't a serious proposal to help with the deficit or to help create jobs. It would do the opposite. It wouldn't create jobs. The Buffett rule, if it were put in place, the revenues collected would pay for government for 11 hours. And yet the president calls this his proposal. Look, this man is out of ideas. He's out of excuses. And in 2012, we're going to make sure he's out of office. And it's not just with taxes that he's been attacking economic liberty. It's also with the spending. $1 trillion deficits. $1 trillion deficits. And you have to be sure that if he were reelected, the next 4 years, you'd see $1 trillion or near $1 trillion deficits, putting us on a road to Greece. This is where we're heading. These kinds of deficits are bad economics. They could put us into economic calamity. But even more than that, they're immoral. I think it's wrong, unfair for my generation to pass on to the young people of the future debts that we haven't paid for, and we've got to stop it. Regulation. And we've got to be careful in the choice of words we use here, because we Republicans are not for elimination of regulation. You have to have regulation and law to make an economy work. You have to have rules to live by. But what the president's done is expanded regulation at such a massive rate that it's not encouraging free enterprise and freedom, but crushing it. And so regulators are insinuating themselves into almost every area of American life. Our personal health care, our energy sector, our transportation sector, I mentioned the financial sector. Look at Dodd-Frank, 787-page bill. Thousands upon thousands of pages of new regulation. They said they put this in place to prevent these these too big to fail banks from growing. But guess what? The too big to fail banks have gotten bigger. It's the smaller banks, the community banks that loan to the small businesses that have been hurt by this piece of legislation. Look, there was once a time that America was proud of the fact that we built the interstate highway system and built the Hoover Dam. Now we can't even build a pipeline. I mean, there was a time when we led the world in manufacturing and exports, and now we lead the world in lawsuits. There was a time when our kids were the best educated in the world, and the public education system in America was a model for the world. And today, 50% of the kids in our 50 largest cities won't graduate from high school. This attack in America, this attack on free enterprise and freedom is crushing the future for our kids with debt, with regulation, with schools that aren't doing their job. And by the way, why is it that our schools are failing? And that's too often because the president takes his direction from the teachers' unions and puts the teachers' unions ahead of our kids. It's time for that to end and put our kids first again. The president says he wants to fundamentally transform America. I don't want to change America. I want to restore to America the principles that made us the hope of the earth. Freedom, economic freedom, political freedom, personal freedom, religious freedom. Now, one thing he did say I agreed with. He said the other day that this is going to be a defining election. And I agree. It's going to be a defining election. We have two very different paths. The path that the president represents is trillion-dollar deficits every year, leading, in my view, to a Greece-like setting where we face economic crisis. The path I represent is cutting federal spending, capping it as a percentage of our economy, and finally balancing our budget. The path he represents is crony capitalism, which is taking care of your cronies. In this case, it can be private sector or public sector unions. It can be saying to Boeing, you can't build a factory in South Carolina because my union friends don't want you to be able to build in a right-to-work state. It could be saying, I'm going to take money from taxpayers and giving it to companies that are owned by people who contributed to my campaign, like Solyndra and Fesker and Tesla and Enter1. By the way, the president wants to pick winners and losers, they say. That's wrong. He just wants to pick losers. Crony capitalism does not work. I do not want to see America go down the path towards crony capitalism. I want to restore the principles of free enterprise and a free marketplace so people know what the future holds and are willing to invest and have economic freedom, which is the result of those things. The president's path represents a course which will tell you what kind of insurance you must have and what kinds of procedures. I believe this is going to be the future under his plan. What kinds of procedures you're allowed to receive from your provider and which you're not allowed to receive. If I'm president, I represent a very different path. I will repeal Obamacare and return your health care decisions to you as citizens. With regards to energy, the energy sector is a place which is critical for jobs, not just for the people who work in the sector, but for all of the enterprises that rely on energy being at a reasonable price to be able to have goods produced at a reasonable price or services delivered at a reasonable price. And so the president's view on energy was spoken in a way I found unusual the other day. He said he's for all of the above when it comes to energy. And I tried to square that with what he's done. Because as you know, he's made it more and more difficult to get coal out of the ground through EPA regulation and more difficult to use coal. He's held off on drilling in Anwar, drilling in the Gulf, drilling in the Outer Continental Shelf for oil, for gas. Made it more difficult to get gas out of the ground by trying to get the EPA and other federal agencies to regulate fracking in the Marcellus Shale and other places around the nation. So how can he be for all of the above? And then I figured it out. He's for all the stuff that comes from above the ground, which means wind and solar. We all like wind and solar, but we also like the stuff that comes from below the ground. We like coal and oil and natural gas. And we'd like to develop more modern nuclear technology. I am for all of the above. I'll get America finally to become energy secure and independent of the cartels. This is a critical time for the country. It is going to be a decisive point as to whether America is going to remain the leader of the free world with free enterprise, with people pursuing their dreams, building enterprises of all kinds. And their success does not make us poorer. The success of people in this nation pursuing their dreams makes us all better off. There was a time in America when we celebrated people who had a great idea, and maybe just a corner of their garage was devoted to starting a business, and they created enterprises that employ fellow Americans. This president seems to find that unacceptable. He attacks Americans. I find it an extraordinary thing to watch the president attack one American after the other, find scapegoats to try and blame for the fact that he's been a failure. If I'm president, I'll commit to this. We will remain one nation under God. When the founders wrote those documents, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, they did not just draft them for a temporary period of time. As that wonderful American hymn, America the Beautiful, states, "Oh, beautiful for patriot dream that sees beyond the years." They contemplated that the generations that would follow them would hold true to those principles and defend them. And we have, over the centuries. Over 1 million American lives have been shed protecting freedom. I'm moved by the extraordinary sacrifice of those who love this country and the deep patriotism that exists in the heart of the American people. One of the great experiences of my life has come through getting to know American people. When Katie made her introduction, she spoke about my experience at the Olympics, and I thought I'd just share with you one of my favorite experiences from the Olympic Games of 2002, and it relates to the music you heard just a moment ago. It was at the closing ceremonies, and the Vice President Cheney, came to the president's box, and he said, "Mitt, I wonder if you'd select one athlete to come sit with me to represent all the American athletes that have participated in these Olympic Games." And I chose a guy named Derek Parra. Derek's about 5'4", born in Los Angeles, Hispanic American. He's a rollerblader. And his friend said to him, "You know, if you want to get an Olympic medal someday, you're going to have to learn a different sport." So he picked up ice skating and strapped on some skates, went to one of the local skating clubs, and not a lot of ice in Los Angeles, and actually was pretty fast. Worked and trained and competed with some of the big fellas from Wisconsin and Minnesota and Michigan and maybe Pennsylvania, and made the United States speed skating team. Came to the Olympic Games and competed extraordinarily, won a silver medal in the 5,000 meters, and then a gold medal in the 1,500 meters. Fastest man in the world on ice, Derek Parra. So I invited him to sit with the vice president. He came into the box, and I stopped him, and I said, "Derek, what was the most meaningful experience in your Olympic Games?" And it wasn't the silver. It wasn't the gold. He said, "Mitt, it was being honored to carry in the flag that had flown above the World Trade Center on September 11, 2001, into the opening ceremonies." You may remember, if you watch those ceremonies, that the flag is about 8 feet by 12 feet. It's badly torn and burned. It can't be put up a flagpole because of its condition, but it can be carried. And so 8 American athletes were selected by their teammates to carry the flag in horizontally. They were surrounded by firefighters and law enforcement officials from New York. And he said, "We expected that when the announcer told the audience that this flag was coming into the stadium, that the 55, 60,000 people would burst into cheers. But instead, total silence, complete reverence." And he said, "So we carried the flag and stopped in front of the choir, and they began performing the national anthem." And he said, "It was hard to hold on to my emotions. while they were singing those words, and I was holding that flag. And then he said the choir did something we hadn't expected. Now, I knew it was coming because I chose the version of the national anthem the choir sang. And in the version I chose, it was a 1930s arrangement by Robert Shaw. You sing the last stanza as a reprise. Sing it twice. And the second time through, the sopranos go up an octave, and there's much greater orchestration. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? And he said, Mitt, this time as the choir sang it again, a gust of wind blew in the flag and lifted it in our hands. And he said, for me, it was as if the spirits of all those that had fought and died for American liberty had just blown in that flag. And he said, the tears began to roll down my face. We're patriotic people. We love America. We love the freedoms that have been won by heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country love, and mercy more than life. These are critical times for America. We face huge challenges domestically, our economy, our deficits, the failure of our school system, internationally, in Iran that wants to become nuclear, China becoming stronger economically, potentially militarily. We face huge challenges. I happen to believe that if we have leaders that will tell the truth and live with integrity and who know how to lead and are willing to draw upon the patriotism of the American people and ask them to rise and join together, not to be divided, but to come together and to overcome the challenges we have, that we will do so. This is the greatest nation in the history of the earth because of the American people, not because of government, because of the people here in this country. Calling on the American people is the work we have to do. Join me in the months ahead. We've got work to do. We need to make sure we win Pennsylvania. If we win Pennsylvania, we'll take back the White House and keep America the hope of the earth. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks, you guys. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Romney.
Thank you.
We have a small gift to be presented to you. It's a taste of Lancaster County, home of the whoopie pie and Wilbur chocolate. It's a sweet gift for you as a foretaste for a sweet victory on November 6th. You may be seated. That gift was given by future Representative Tom Garman, who's running this year.